Ozeng awakened from his sleep to suddenly discover he had gained a supernatural ability to see ghosts. To explain how this all came about, we need to start from that overcast morning. Ozeng was still working diligently as a lawyer at a law firm when his older brother suddenly called him, saying it was urgent and there was no time for detailed explanations. He needed to quit his job immediately. Ozeng wondered what on earth was going on, but when he went downstairs to look, good heavens, his brother was actually waiting there in a luxury sedan. He quickly got in the car and asked what had happened. His brother told him to fasten his seatbelt, then forward the gas pedal, and the car accelerated wildly forward. Ozeng felt the speed was really too fast, but his brother said good cars should be driven like this. Before long, they arrived at their destination, and Ozeng was completely dumbfounded. He had actually believed his brother's nonsense, quit his job, and used all his savings to speculate on cryptocurrency, resulting in both brothers losing everything. Unable to handle the blow, his brother ran to the rooftop and gracefully ended his life with a leap, leaving Ozeng alone to face his wife who wanted a divorce. Seeing this situation, he decided to show some masculine backbone. His good friend Gou advised Ozeng, saying since he studied law, why not get a labor consultant certificate, and he'd arrange the work. Once again, Ozeng believed his friend's nonsense, secluded himself to study intensively for over a year, and actually managed to pass the exam and land on his feet. But then Gou had an accident. Ozeng's scalp went numb. His good friend advised him again, saying at over 40 years old, going into a company to be scolded by young subordinates was no different from playing a eunuch in empresses in the palace. Better to open his own practice. Ozeng thought the same, but the problem was he had no startup capital. Just download a loan app and get the money problem solved. Ozeng believed his friend's words, got drunk as a scout, and on his way home passing through a square, he took out his business card and placed it on a statue. The gears of fate began to turn slowly at that moment. A few months later, Ozeng's practice officially opened, mainly helping others recover unpaid wages. Unable to find suitable employees, he called his sister-in-law Juju to help. This girl was a social media blogger who was utterly incompetent. Her videos got neither likes nor followers. How pathetic is that? Time flew by for over a month, and despite Ozeng's luck supposedly turning, he hadn't landed a single case. His sister-in-law sent a message saying if he didn't pay wages soon, she'd file a complaint with the labor department. Ozeng's eyes lit up. He'd have his sister-in-law assign this case to himself, giving the company income, and with income, he could pay wages, creating a perfect closed loop. Ozeng's mindset was about to explode. The company was started with online loans, and now not only had he made no money, he owed a mountain of debt. Just as the practice was about to close down, Juju introduced him to a colleague. This Xiaoyu was an internet celebrity with 1 million followers who was recently planning a video project. Looking at the current situation, many companies weren't compliant with safety production standards and relevant departments. For the sake of corporate tax revenue and under-the-table income, chose to turn a blind eye. Xiaoyu really wanted to expose this phenomenon, but he didn't understand laws and regulations. So he ordered to team up with Ozeng to film all those shady dealings and create videos to clean up these bad companies. After hearing this, Ozeng wasn't interested and got up to leave. Unexpectedly, Juju said Xiaoyu's commercial rate for one video was as high as 10 million won, and he promised to share some with the company. Ozeng immediately turned around and asked when they were leaving. He was ready. Not for the money, mind you, he just couldn't stand those unscrupulous companies. On the way, Xiaoyu told Ozeng the plan first. They'd enter factories to do some safety inspections, he'd handle the filming, and Ozeng was a bit worried they might get beaten up for this approach. And one morning, the three of them visited several factories to film material, but didn't capture a single piece of footage, though they did collect quite a bit of hush money. Ozeng took the opportunity to pay off small loans and rent, feeling refreshed all over. After lunch, they targeted a large steel mill called Taihai Steel. As soon as Ozeng entered the workshop, he spotted problems. The workshop director ran over shouting, "Who the hell are you?" Ozeng identified himself and stated his purpose. He was a properly registered labor consultant with the right to conduct public interest investigations of companies. Before he could finish speaking, an overhead crane behind him knocked down some steel materials that came crashing straight down. Ozeng entered a void space where a loud male voice echoed in the distance. Ozeng asked, "Hey buddy, What are you? Where is this? Am I dead? The voice told Ozing to stop talking and listen carefully. Every second, laborers were dying, the previous second from overwork, this second from workplace accidents, and next from accumulated fatigue. Ozing asked what this meant. The voice said he couldn't save everyone, so he would ask some agents to help those wrongfully dead workers escape from the abyss. Just as Ozing was about to speak, two contracts suddenly appeared before his eyes. The immortal told him he was supposed to die today, but if he signed this agreement, he belonged to him, and he could save him once. Ozing thought it over. Saving his life was the priority. Ozing was so scared he wet his pants, and the undercover investigation plan was declared a failure. Xiao Yu suggested switching factories, but Ozing wasn't in the mood. He just experienced some strange things. Then he turned his head and was terrified, telling his brother-in-law not to act crazy. Ozing's teeth were chattering. Couldn't they see? Juju told her brother-in-law to stop fooling around. This wasn't funny at all. Ozing forced himself to turn his head, trying not to look at the young man in the adjacent seat. But when they returned to the company, that Dai had actually followed them. Juju couldn't help but ask, "You keep saying ghost, 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 where's the ghost?" Ozing said, "Right beside you." Xiao Yu had a sudden inspiration. Why not film a ghost video? It would definitely be hugely popular. Ozing could tell the two of them simply didn't believe him. He sat across from the young man and asked, "What injustice do you have?" Ling Zhu was born into a rural family, and after graduating from vocational high school, he planned to work in the city. Before leaving, his mother gave him countless reminders: eat well when you get there, sleep on time no matter how busy you are, and if you can't adapt, just come home early. Under his teacher's introduction, Zhengzhu entered Teihai Steel, a company that had just been taken over by the second generation for management. The boss's son I told Mingzhu that their factory's probationary period was 1 year, and if he did well, he could become a permanent employee. While talking, this guy pushed open a shipping container. This was the employee dormitory. After seeing the environment, Mingzhu immediately asked he'd heard from his teacher that they would arrange off-site accommodation. This question really annoyed what's wrong with this place? If something happens in the workshop, you can get there immediately. Do you know what the job market is like now? Are you going to do this job or not? If you won't, plenty of others will. Mingzhu applied for a maintenance position, and a senior colleague told him to look inside the machine. That chain often got stuck, and you just needed to crawl in and brush some oil on it. Before Mingzhu could speak, the senior handed him a blood-stained maintenance manual, telling him to look up anything he didn't understand. For the next 6 months, he threw himself wholeheartedly into his work. Whenever his mother asked, he would always say the factory environment was great, the boss was kind, the work was easy, wages were paid on time, the accommodation was good, and the factory food was also good. He told his mother not to worry, their factory was very legitimate. And he'd even made a foreign friend. Ozing was jolted awake in Rwanda video to find himself frozen in place. The two asked what was wrong, and Ozing told them what he had seen. Juju looked completely disbelieving, but Xiao Yu searched online and found there really was someone named Mingzhu, though unfortunately, the young man was now dead. Only then did Ozing realize he was really seeing ghosts. To get to the bottom of this matter, the three of them found Mingzhu's mother through a reporter, only to learn that Mingzhu's father had died years earlier, and his mother had raised her son alone, thinking she'd have someone to rely on for the rest of her life. But then this happened. The three of them deliberated all night. This matter had to be investigated thoroughly. They first found the source of the incident, Mingzhu's mentor, but this guy completely shirked responsibility. Ozing was familiar with vocational high school tactics to improve graduate employment rates. They'd refer students to any sweatshop, because as long as employment rates were high, they'd get more students. Catching evidence against them would be nearly impossible. They still had to investigate Teihai Steel. Since Ozing and Juju had shown their faces last time, only Xiao Yu could go this time. Only Xiao Yu could go this time. Upida was resumed. The probationary period was still 1 year. While watching the live stream, Ozing complained that this already violated to regulations. Xiao Yu was assigned to the foreign worker group. Ozing had an impression of this person and instructed Xiao Yu to get close to him. Perhaps this person would know the truth. He didn't know that Xiao Yu had already been exposed. Nemo could also tell that this Xiao Yu wasn't really here to work. Since he'd been found out, Xiao Yu stopped pretending and frankly said he was here to help everyone. But Nemo coldly replied that he didn't want to be deported. While they were talking, a luxury car drove into the factory. The two lookouts saw that the big boss Tadi Ai had actually come. During a break, Xiao Yu handed over Ming Zu's diary. When Nemo opened it, the diary not only mentioned him, but also contained Ming Zu's aspirations for the future, establishing himself in the big city, being filial to his mother, traveling to brother Nemo's homeland. This diary stopped at September 7th. That night, Xiao Yu entered the factory intending to continue talking with Nemo, but ran into Tabier. He guiltily averted his gaze, but the boss was coming straight for him. The two outside saw things going badly and quickly started the car. The workshop was already in chaos, with workers swarming forward. Xiao Yu jumped onto a conveyor belt that was immediately pushed off, then grabbed onto an overhead crane as a forklift charge treated him. Xiao Yu let go and landed on the truck's roof. Seeing this, the driver floored the gas and spun the wheel wildly, making the forklift spin continuously. Xiao Yu quickly became dizzy and was thrown off. At the critical moment, rescue finally arrived. The three got in their car planning to escape but were blocked by police cars. Facing the police, the three told the truth: they were here for undercover investigation of a sweatshop. Tabier exploded when he heard this. Who's running a sweatshop? The police reminded the three that this constituted an illegal trespass and business interference, and needed to come to the station for questioning. Ozing stepped forward, saying they were investigating the wrongful death of a high school student. Tabier told us Aang not to talk nonsense about wrongful death, that matter had been settled. Nemo finally couldn't hold back. He ran out and stammered that he was at the scene that night, and the truth wasn't like that. 3 years ago, on the eve of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Ming Zu was looking forward to the holiday. He'd been away for more than half a year. They could finally go home once. He invited Nemo to come along. His mother's sweet and sour pork ribs were delicious. While they were, shop directors suddenly pushed open the door and told Ming Zu to quickly go check the machine was stuck. Within 10 minutes, an accident occurred. I rushed to the scene upon hearing the news and saw Wu Yang and a group of people lifting the machine. Ming Zu's entire arm was caught in the machine's chain, with oil and mud mixed with the pungent smell of blood. Seeing this, Ashai quickly called his father for help. After hearing about the incident, Tabier told I not to call an ambulance first. The kid hadn't been made permanent and didn't have accident insurance. If he ended up in the hospital and his family made a fuss, they might have to support him for life. Ashai anxiously asked his father what to do. Tabier decided immediately: first drive the workers away, wait for the kid to die, then call the police. After hanging up, Ashai drove the workers away. Nemo wanted to call an ambulance, but his Korean wasn't good at the time, and after getting through, he couldn't communicate the location. He wanted to go out and find a hospital, but this factory was in the suburbs, in the middle of nowhere, and he didn't know where any hospitals were. In the end, he could only stand in the distance and watch helplessly as Ming Zu went from screaming to pleading to whimpering, finally dying in hatred. Ah still tried to argue, but Nemo called on everyone to step forward. Inna's aim came out and said it wasn't necessary. Ming Zu's mother had shown him the files. Ming's death time was recorded as Dreet, but the video was filmed at Shardishifen. I am on October E Street. 9 full hours. An ambulance could have circled Korea to end a half-times. Concealment of workplace injury and safety obligations to crimes with a minimum 10-year sentence. You father and son can wait to go to prison. A few days later, this incident made the news. Tehaiop Steel was shut down, and the father and son were arrested. The three went to the countryside, bringing the video Nemo had filmed, finally making Ming Zu's mother, who hadn't smiled in 3 years, smile once. After the video finished, Ming Zu's mother didn't know how to thank them and wanted them to stay for dinner before leaving. Ozing instinctively declined, but Ming Zu in the corner nodded vigorously. Ming Zu's mother asked what they'd like to eat, and Ozing blurted out, "Sweet and sour pork ribs." After dinner, the three got up to leave, and Ming Zu's mother saw them all the way to their car. On the way home, Ozang gained a new understanding of the labor consultant profession. Although the work was hard, it was very fulfilling. Juju invited Xiao Yu to join the company, so you wouldn't have to think of video topics anymore. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a loud crash above the three of them. Ozing had died again. He helplessly asked the immortal, "What exactly do you mean?" A contract flew from the distance, clearly stating unconditional repatriation of souls within 6 months. After reading it, Ozing was even more furious. Isn't this a contract of adhesion? Yes, precisely because of these adhesion contracts, working people in this world live so miserably. After hearing this, Ozing couldn't help but curiously asked, "Who exactly are you?" Everyone present, he roared in the flames, "Please respect the Labor Standards Act. We are not machines." The doctor at the hospital was terrified to be hit in the head by high-voltage wires and come out completely unharmed. Ozing told Juju they were screwed. The immortal had forced him to sign an adhesion contract. Juju completely ignored this. After hearing about it, Xiaoyu thought Brother Zheng must have been frightened and suggested going to a sauna to sweat out the negative energy. Ozing believed this and found a sauna with a steam room. But just after lying down for a moment, Ozing's mindset exploded. What did this female ghost want? She neither spoke nor came over. He rushed back to the studio all the way, finally shaking off that female ghost, or so he thought. Ozing really couldn't take it anymore. He told the young lady to speak directly. Did she have some injustice? The girl stood up and nodded. Ozing looked down at the name tag, Xiao and Ying. The next second, Ying suddenly flew over. The next day, Juju noticed her brother-in-law wasn't quite right. He was acting feminine and kept muttering, "He wants revenge. He wants revenge." Juju was really worried and followed him into a taxi. Near the hospital, Ozing started convulsing all over. With no choice, Juju carried her brother-in-law and rushed into the emergency room. Dr. Gi happened to be off duty today, and the substitute doctor curiously asked, "Brother, why are you here again?" Unexpectedly, Ozing suddenly grabbed the doctor and screamed, "Why did you treat me like that?" The doctor shouted for help in confusion, and Ozing was pushed onto a bed. Juju told her brother-in-law to stop making a scene, but the current Ozing was no longer Ozing. As soon as Juju left, he rushed out of the ward and followed that doctor. The doctor was completely furious and threatened to call the police. Ozing suddenly spoke, "New guy, are you even a doctor? What right do you have to boss people around?" These words shocked the doctor to his core. The man was quickly thrown out of the hospital. Juju asked her brother-in-law if he'd gone crazy. This would result in legal trouble. Ozing acted as if he hadn't heard anything. His brain suddenly flashed with several memories, and he realized he'd been possessed by Ying. At this time, the doctor had also gotten off work. How would outsiders know what he'd done to Ying? Could it be a coincidence? Not a single word was wrong. It absolutely couldn't be a coincidence. Ozing was also going crazy, telling the two that he'd been possessed by an evil spirit. Xiaoyu searched online for Bridge Rent Hospital and found that there indeed had been a nurse who jumped to her death at age Shisen. After seeing the photo, Ozing directly stated it was him. What to do? What to do? Xiaoyu thought about it and took Ozing to see a sorceress. Unexpectedly, as soon as this sorceress saw Ozing, she immediately knelt and bowed. Xiaoyu asked the sorceress what she saw. The sorceress instructed Ozing to obey and not go against the general's wishes. Otherwise he'd die a violent death. Xiaoyu continued asking if there was any way not to be possessed. The sorceress said now there was a June Shabbat EH return sale with blessed charms at a huge discount, buy one get one free. The three left the sorceress's place and went to a church instead. Xiaoyu explained the situation and begged the priest to sprinkle some holy water. The priest adjusted his glasses and told the three not to be superstitious. There were no ghosts in this world, and if there were, they were made by people. Since Jesus wouldn't help, the three could only turn to Buddha, praying for an entire afternoon. This should solve the problem, right? 3 months ago, Ying had just started work and was cursed out by senior nurse Sister Lee for incorrectly filling out a hospitalization log. Hospital work was very complex, with Ying spending almost every day running around, with no time to eat or use the bathroom. Being unfamiliar with procedures as a new employee, she had to arrive an hour early every day to prepare medication, make rounds, and keep records. After working overtime for more than a month, she was mentally exhausted. Ozing awakened from the painful memories, feeling that being a nurse was incredibly difficult. But the spirit told him that was just the beginning. Ozing said he'd take this case and the rest could be told orally. The spirit said no, human joys and sorrows are not universal, and only through personal experience can one truly understand. Xiao Quan called Ying over and told him to inject potassium chloride into the patient in bed. Shisen. Ying asked the doctor to look at the report again, and she says patient values had returned to normal and didn't need more injections. Xiao Quan chuckled and asked, "New guy, are you even a doctor? What right do you have to boss people around?" An month later, En Ying was on the verge of collapse from overwork and reluctantly filed a complaint with the committee, requesting a few days off. The seniors sternly told him that if leadership wrote in his file that this nurse frequently shows negative work attitude, he'd have trouble finding work in the future. The door was suddenly pushed open, and Sister Lee angrily dragged En Ying to the equipment room, pulling out the complaint form and shouting, "Everyone's working overtime, why are you the only one filing complaints? You've been here for months and still can't do the job properly." She angrily threw away the complaint form, and En Ying crouched down to pick it up. The loudspeakers suddenly announced an emergency call. The patient in bed Shusen needed resuscitation. In an instant, all medical staff on the floor rushed to that room. They fought hard to save the patient, but in the end, he became a vegetable. The patient's family lost control on the spot and attacked En Ying, pulling her hair. Dr. Zhao Quan quickly apologized and admitted it was their nurse's mistake. This statement stunned En Ying. He had clearly followed the doctor's orders for the medication. Zhao Quan flew into a rage. En Ying knew this matter absolutely couldn't be compromised. He insisted he had followed the doctor's orders. Sister Lee couldn't stand it and spoke up for him, causing Zhao Quan to leave angrily. Sister Lee told En Ying to accept his fate and write a letter of repentance. En Ying quickly pulled out his notebook, which clearly recorded that Dr. Zhao Quan had given oral medical orders. Sister Lee asked quietly, "If you were hospital leadership, would you choose to believe a doctor who's worked for 5 years or a new nurse?" Time flew by another month, and En Ying completely broke down and submitted his resignation. But the HR supervisor told him the employment contract stated that resignation or job hopping was prohibited within 1 year. And besides, the patient's family had already filed a lawsuit. Both the hospital and En Ying were responsible. This lawsuit definitely couldn't be won, so he should quickly prepare compensation money. Ozing felt like he died again. When he woke up, the tearing sensation of falling still ached faintly. With his internal organs churning, he didn't want to be possessed by En Ying again, so he gathered his energy to research and piece together the entire incident. He needed the bereaved family's consent for the firm to represent this case. But today happened to be the weekend, and Zhu and Xiaoyu weren't working, so Ozing had to go to En Ying's home alone. What surprised him was that En Ying's parents had no idea what had happened. They actually believed the hospital's explanation of suicide. Ozing helplessly asked why they didn't hire a lawyer or inquire with relevant departments. En Ying's father explained that they had gone to Seoul but didn't know how to take the subway or buses. They were completely lost. Now even calling taxis required using phones. They didn't understand anything and confused reached a settlement with the hospital. On Monday, Ozing found the detective handling this case. But the police and hospital had the same story. En Ying was simply suicidal due to breaking up with his boyfriend. Ozing knew he wouldn't get anything and could only return to the office. While copying materials, a sheet of paper fell under a cabinet. Ozing suddenly remembered that when En Ying was arguing with Nurse Lee, the complaint form had fallen under the cabinet. If they could find it, they could prove En Ying wasn't simply suicidal. The three discussed and decided to send Xiaoyu to steal it, since Ozing had been possessed last time and beaten up Zhao Quan. Coincidentally, Xiaoyu had upgraded his equipment. He bought glasses with a camera that could live stream. But Xiaoyu's luck was really bad. He was exposed as soon as he entered internal medicine. Seeing this, Ozing rushed into the hospital. He was even more unlucky than Xiaoyu drive. Quan spotted him the moment he entered, and the security guards immediately rushed over. Seeing trouble, Xiaoyu took off his white coat and escaped into the stairwell, where he collided with Ozing. Was security about to arrive, the two had no choice but to run to the rooftop, where Sister Lee happened to be climbing stairs too. After En Ying's death, the hospital forestalled doctors and nurses to sign confidentiality agreements to cover up the incident. Sister Lee naturally signed too. But it seemed only she was getting retribution. She had finally gotten pregnant recently but soon miscarried. Months of pressure made Sister Lee unable to cope. She really didn't want to live anymore. But just as she was about to jump, a hand reached out. The next day, Xiaoyu made the footage into a video that got 1 million views in less than a day. After this was exposed, the confidentiality agreements became meaningless, and Sister Lee appeared on camera to tell the truth about En Ying's suicide. Working continuously for 3 months, being framed by supervisors, facing wrongful death lawsuits, an astronomical compensation any new workplace employee would basically collapse. En Ying's boyfriend saw the video and proactively contacted Xiaoyu. Only then did the three learn that En Ying had already suffered from depression before his suicide. En Ying's boyfriend deeply regretted it. If he had been more caring at the time, this might not have happened. A few days later, Xiaoyu seized the moment and held a live stream, filming the labor department's raid on the hospital. Under pressure from public opinion, the hospital fired Quan, who had framed En Ying. The day this guy left the hospital, many netizens came to mourn En Ying, and the hospital entrance was filled with flowers. As a guide, Oz Ying saw En Ying off on his final journey. The three left the hospital with Shuju clamoring to go eat barbecue. While passing an intersection, Oz Ying's shoelaces suddenly came undone. This concludes the plot summary of the first 6 episodes of Oh My Ghost Clients. This is a highly realistic drama, with each 2-episode arc telling a story representing a different group. As for whether to continue updating, you're the boss, it's up to you. That's it for this episode. I'm Shu-san. Remember to follow so you won't get lost for the next update.